Good evening and welcome to the Hanson Board of Selectmen meeting of May 19th, 2020. This meeting is being held virtually under the governor's orders during the COVID-19 and is available or will be made available on Whitman Hanson Cable after the fact. We're also keeping a recording up at Town Hall. The public will not be able to participate in this simply because we don't have the right platform for that to work flawlessly. We are joined tonight by a number of people and we've done a brief roll call prior to the meeting, so we know that they're here, and a few will be joining us as we progress. And just because we are meeting virtually, every vote will be a roll call vote, which is not the norm, but it is in this virtual world. And after each item that we're discussing, we'll go around to each of the board members to see if they have questions or concerns or comments. So with that, we will begin the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could all join me. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And if you don't mind joining me in a moment of silence, thinking about all the people that are on the front lines, our first responders, and folks affected by what we're going through right now. Okay, and Mr. Bloss, may I impose upon you to do the public announcements and upcoming meetings?
You may. Volunteers are needed on the following committees: Facebook Upkeep Committee, 200th Anniversary, Conservation Commission regular and 2 associate members, Cultural Council, Disabilities, Economic Development, Finance, Highway Building Committee, Historical Commission, Memorial Day Patriotic Observance, Memorial Field Trustees, North River Commission, and Zoning Board Alternate. Applications for appointment and info on the committee are available on the town website, www.hanson-ma.gov. Upcoming meetings: Tuesday, May 26th, Tuesday, June 2nd, Tuesday, June 9th, all Board of Selectmen's meeting at 6 p.m., and Tuesday, June 15th, the 2020 annual and special town meetings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And with that, Mr. Keeley, I see that you are on, and we've got Kate Feodoff, our legal counsel. The first item on our agenda is to discuss the June 15th, 2020 town meeting and discuss an update or a postponement. So Sean, I think I will turn it over to you as our town moderator. I know there's been some emails exchanged about the feasibility of potentially having the meeting on the 15th and what that would look like and how we can make that happen. So thoughts?
Sure. Well, I saw and responded to John's survey. I saw a few of the responses, but maybe John can fill me in on what everybody else said as a response.
Yes, thank you. It ended up being pretty much mixed of the people that responded. 9, 10, I think it's 17 to 14. 17 yes and 14 no. I can double count my math, but that's about what it ended up being. So almost even between a yes and a no for June 15th.
Yeah, and John, you were surveying the stakeholders, right? The department heads and commission heads.
Yeah, I tried to think of the people that would show up, you know, the people that would have to present or would have to be there at any town meeting, and tried to get their sense of what they thought.
Okay. Well, it's not encouraging to me that it was evenly split. You know, obviously, if we go forward as planned, we're going to have, you know, people who need to be there uncomfortable with being in the meeting. And just as an aside, I had suggested to John in my email Perhaps one way to mitigate the problem would be to hold the meeting outside. Perhaps getting one of those big tents we hold a wedding in and get a sound system. And perhaps with the fresh air circulating, it would make people a little more comfortable being in a large gathering. So it was just a thought, but I thought not a bad one, especially the later we put this, the better weather we can expect.
Well, so we've got the date for June 15th, and it seemed to me as though at the very least, we're probably not going to want to hold it at the middle school because that auditorium with social distancing and a quorum of 100, which I know I'm being overly optimistic that we'll even get a quorum, but seemed like a logistical nightmare. And so I know that the Whitman folks are holding their town meeting at the high school, and I think that that's an option that's open to us. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but one of the things that Mr. Hayes had suggested, and I think it may be perhaps what Whitman is doing, is holding it in the gym, which I hadn't even thought about. I had been thinking again about the auditorium, but the gym makes a lot more sense in terms of the social distancing and all of the various entrances and the ways that you could direct traffic. So I don't know what the next steps are on that. What is the date? I believe today is the day that we have to tell Beth Sloan whether the meeting is being postponed or not, right? Based on our last meeting?
That's my understanding, yes.
Yep. Okay.
What date is Whitman holding their meeting?
Pardon?
What date is Whitman holding their meeting at this point?
It's the same week, Sean, but I just don't remember the date, to be honest with you. I can look it up while we're meeting. I just don't remember the date.
Often have it on the same night, so I mean, obviously that can't happen. I'd be fully in favor of holding it at the high school. I hadn't thought of the gym. I think that would make a lot more sense.
Okay.
So do you want me to talk about the logistics of if you do want to postpone, what the limitations are and all of that stuff, Laura, so everyone can have that in their brains while they're making this decision?
I mean, sure, but I think, we're trying to stay the course as much as we can, but it would be helpful, whatever information you've got that you could share with us so that we know we're making a fully informed decision.
Yeah, there was some concern that you couldn't postpone because, elections in Hanson are posted on the warrant. And so we were concerned that we would be in violation of the bylaw if we held the town meeting later. So I took a look at the emergency legislation, however, and what that legislation says is notwithstanding any general special or bylaw to the contrary, the Board of Selectmen can postpone. So in my mind, you can, despite that requirement in the bylaw for elections being on the warrant, postpone the meeting. And what you could do even further is if you wanted, you could either post the warrant so it's consistent with, the election, or just wait to postpone and post a separate election warrant. So the only point of that conversation is it's legally feasible to do so despite the restrictions that are imposed by Hanson's bylaws.
Okay, so originally and I know this is an ever evolving, that would be the understatement of the day, but originally we were under the impression that we could not separate those two things, the town meeting from the election, in that the town meeting would set the date for the election. But you're saying, kind of reading what's out there for guidance, reading our bylaws, that there might be a way to do that. And I guess what is clear though is if we don't have our town meeting by June 30th, right, we go to a 1/12 budget for the town. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's a 1/12 plus budget, and I just sent out some guidance. I'm sure you guys got it on on recent DLS guidelines for setting a 1/12 budget, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and it's a 1/12 plus budget. And so because what happens in municipal finances, there are a lot of bills that get paid on the front end. So your pension assessment is a good example. And if you pay that all up front, you get a discount. And I think you may get a discount on your insurance. So all these kind of bills come due right in the beginning of July. So the 1/12 plus means that you can still pay those. So when you're setting a 1/12 budget, you have to be mindful of what you anticipate you can ultimately appropriate, right? You don't want to suddenly, oh, I want to build a new school and I'm just going to put in the 1/12 budget. But you can accommodate some of those upfront costs that you expect to happen in July. There's a lot of flexibility there. There's an interesting piece regarding the regional school. That's actually been out of the town's hands. The normal way of setting that particular budget is removed, so that section 16B, you don't follow that anymore. And DESE comes in and decides. It's the director.
Right.
So that's a little bit particular to the towns with regional school districts.
Okay, and the Whitman town meeting is actually the following week. It's June 22nd. So with that, I'm just gonna, if you don't mind, Kate, just go around to the board, see what kind of questions people have got, thoughts on, do we even want to talk about postponing? Do we just want to move forward and, stick with the original date? Mr. Mitchell.
Actually, Laura, could I just jump in before we go?
Sure, Sean.
I was just wondering, I'd like to get Kate's opinion on what if we did a hybrid type of a town meeting where we widely circulated the GoToMeeting or Zoom, code to get in, and then people could attend that way. I could have an assistant moderator manning or working the computer and allowing people to that way. I mean, it might allow us to hold this a little earlier, especially for those people. And, I don't know why the 14 people said no, but, they must have had a very good reason. And I would imagine a lot of people with pre-existing conditions, if I had one, I wouldn't want to go to a big meeting either. That would allow the
So you're asking for a part, like maybe still partially old school, but like partially a hybrid and virtual type of thing. Is that permissible, Kate? And how do you check people in? Like, how do people, is there a process for checking them in like we would do at town meeting?
So remote participation is not permissible for voters, but if Sean, if what you're talking about is maybe the department heads and if they're speaking on a particular topic or giving a presentation, I think there's actually no prohibition there because they're not participating in the meeting in the sense that they're setting the legislation, rather they're just doing a presentation. So think about a regular town meeting and you have a PowerPoint, or some people don't have a PowerPoint. So that's all. Whether or not it could come across, like you could maybe have a projector and zoom the presenters in because they're the ones who provide the information, but the voters certainly cannot participate remotely.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I was kind of hoping that there would be a way to do that because, obviously one of my main goals is to have as much participation as we can.
Yeah, and the real problem is going to be a quorum. If you feel like that's an issue for if residents are expressing that, the quorum is the real problem because there was legislation that was pending to allow for the reduction in a quorum, but that has not passed. And I think the recent information I have is that it's losing traction. So there is a way to reduce a quorum, but you have to do it through litigation, and it's not unfriendly litigation, but it's not, I say, overly taxing, but it's not through any emergency legislation.
I don't think it would want to, I don't think would want to reduce, given all the, I understand where we're at, and I know we've got like, you know, kind of mixed feelings about whether people feel comfortable, but we've got some pretty important items on our warrant, and I don't think that that would bode well to reduce the quorum, even if it was permissible. So, Sean, did you have anything else before I circle around to everybody and get their thoughts and questions?
Thank you, Laura.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell.
I think that town meeting on June 15th at the middle school might be a little bit tight, but I wouldn't be opposed to doing something like Sean said, either at the gym at Whitman Hanson or possibly outside. But I'm kind of on the fence on this. If we had to postpone for 2 weeks, I don't think it's a big deal either. But I think at the middle school, it's just too small. And I don't think we'd be able to pull that off.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, any questions for Kate or Sean, Kenny?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, all right. Mr. Dyer.
Hi, everyone. My thoughts on this is I think we should postpone it, go to a 112 plus budget until we have further guidance from the governor. I don't think with the staging of reopening Massachusetts would be permissible for our town meeting. I think it would be okay to go to a 112 plus budget, as Kate was referring to, because I don't want voters to have to feel that I have to go risk my health to make sure I vote on something that's going to be permissible with my budget, or vice versa. Am I going to miss out on voting on something that's going to make or break the bank? So that's where my train of thought is.
And I was on an MMA call today, Matt, and Polito, you know, the lieutenant governor, said that they know this is a problem. They know this is a problem, and they also know that getting guidance to town hall and town government about how to reopen for public services is a problem, but they know that they've got to focus on this. So I'm not saying that we'll get this before, you know, we were going to have town meeting. It didn't sound that way, but okay, good point. Mr. Hickey?
Hi, everyone. Referring to John's list that Sean had made a point, and John had said it was 17 to 14. There are other names, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but there are names missing from this list, mine included. And I told John up front when we decided to do this list that I would be a no. I'm not sure about Kate. I don't see Matt's name. I don't see Greer's name or John's name, which could tip the scales. But this was just an informal thing to find out how people feel if the meeting was held on the 15th. I am not in favor of holding the meeting inside anywhere on June 15th. So my question, Kate, would be to you, if the town meeting was postponed to, let's say, July 15th or even August 15th, at that time, whether it's July or August, could the 112 budget plus be changed to what is agreed upon at town meeting?
Yeah, so what happens with the 112 budget is that actually the Board of Selectmen sets the budget, right? And depending upon how your town works or your preference, you can obviously work with the accountant, the town administrator, you can get some input by FinCom, but the budget gets set by the Board of Selectmen. It's submitted to the director at DLS, and the director ultimately approves it. And he approves it only for 1 month. So if you do a 112 budget for July, you write it all up, send it to him, and he approves it. It has to get approved monthly. As soon as you have your town meeting, the omnibus budget takes over. And that's when, and then your 112 budget goes away. So the town meeting ultimately balances your books for you, you know?
Okay, so basically, if we postpone the meeting until the 15th, we would have to do this, what you had just mentioned, for 1 month. And then if we decide, you know, in the middle of June, that we need to postpone it again, we would just have to fill out that same information again until we actually have town meeting, correct?
Exactly. And for anyone who's going to be listening, it doesn't mean you have an open checkbook to say, I have my, you know, the budget I want and I can do whatever I want. So I'll give you, for example, of what you can't include in a 1/12 budget. If you have collective bargaining agreements that are settled but not yet approved through the town meeting process, so you're in your first year, those increases can't be part of the 1/12 budget. They strongly discourage any capital expenditures. So, you know, if you finally wanted the beautiful water fountain in front of Hanson Town Hall, you can't do that, you know, because that's what they're saying town meeting is for those expenses that people may have different opinions on. So it's really just your operations and the required spending that you need, your pension assessments, your required salary increases pursuant to contracts that are already settled and approved, et cetera. So it's not a free-for-all for anyone who's worried about it.
Mr. Hickey?
I'm good. Thank you, Kate.
All right, that was good info. Mr. Bloss?
Kate, I'm just curious, if we have an August town meeting, let's say, what then is retroactive when after town meeting votes?
So essentially what you're doing with a 1/12 budget is you're essentially deficit spending because nothing's been appropriated, right? The town meeting is the appropriating body. So, you know, if you have a bill, it gets paid through town meeting because they appropriate the money. And so, for example, if you have collective bargaining agreements that are expiring this July and you have settlements, that will get through town meeting, and then you'll have your retroactive salary increases at that point.
That's all I wanted to know. That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. John, did you have a vantage point on this at all? Anything you wanted to ask or any concerns or?
Well, yeah, thank you. I have the guidance from the Department of Local Services, the Division of Local Services for the Mass Department of Revenue, and I've been going through it, and I think I understand what's needed. I'd work with Todd to come up with, like what Kate was just saying, expenditure only plus debt, plus anything that we need to pay in July or August if we were to go to the 1/12 budget. And I'd also, let's say, since the meeting started, Town Clerk Beth Sloan has come into the room here at Town Hall. So I just wanted everyone to know that if they had any questions for her.
Well, I think we'd probably want to hear from Beth to see if she's got any concerns if we were to decide to postpone it. Is there anything we should think about, Beth?
I don't believe that my assistant, Jean Kelly, will be able to be there. And my registrars, I told them that I would have to find someone else to check people in because I do not feel comfortable having them be the checkers as people come in. Other than that, I will do whatever the board suggests. I will be there and I will find other people to check people in.
Okay. I know like Pembroke, I think they've got a special election, maybe it's today or something, but they had advertised to get 18 and 19-year-olds there because they had the same concern that you've got, which is, you know, you don't want to put, we've got I'm not saying everybody that's an election worker is elderly, but we do have quite a few, and they didn't want to have them unnecessarily exposed. So I think, you know, seems to be a general consensus. I think I will, if you guys agree, I think I'll move to the vote. And I'm a little unclear. Kate, do we need a specific date that we're, you know, so do we need to propose another date? And then, you know, if that doesn't end up being feasible, we kick it down the, road again. So should we do the 15th of July? I don't know. I mean, this is sort of like unprecedented. I don't know exactly how the motion should look.
You do need a date certain.
Okay.
And
So,
Laura, if I could just weigh in before you guys,
yes.
Just listening to Beth and to Jim and the rest of you, I would strongly suggest that we move it to mid-July, at least at this point.
Well, that's what we're doing, Sean. That's the motion that I'm looking for. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I'm highly in favor of moving it.
Okay.
Laura?
Okay. Yes.
If you're gonna vote, would you please do it on a Monday? At least keep it on a Monday. The 15th is a Wednesday.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Thank you.
So what is that date, Beth?
The 13th or the 20th.
Okay. Okay, I think mentally we were just thinking like 15th to 15th, but yeah. Okay, I will entertain a motion, and it's at your leisure, either the 13th or the 20th, to postpone the town meeting and special town meeting.
So moved on the 20th.
Okay.
Second on the 20th.
Okay, any further discussion?
Ms. Chair,
Mr.
it's
Dyer?
Matt Dyer. With Kevin Sullivan on the line, can we just get a perspective from the Finance Committee on their thoughts on a 112 plus budget?
Sure, Mr. Sullivan?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. I'm sure everyone's well aware the difficult situation we're in right now from a financial standpoint, especially with the school. I don't know if everyone had a chance to listen to the school committee meeting last night. My only concern is, I'll call it, with the great compromise that they've sort of produced out of that meeting, that's going to require additional vote. How does that affect the if we go to 112th, how does that affect Whitman Hanson going into the original into that first month? I know school's not in session, but at the same time, all this bargain we're sort of sitting on is contingent upon, from what I understand, them voting, the town voting this sort of one year 50-50 compromise and then going to the statutory method. So my concern is the issue that it runs into with, I guess, the temporary agreement we have figured out. If Whitman's going to still hold theirs and agree, I'd hate to push it out to let time. I understand the concerns. My concern is that the longer we push it out, the more I don't want to say opposition, but it builds behind it. This is a one year fix that I think works for us, but that's just mine is purely financial.
Well, and we appreciate that. We need that perspective. I'm
also very nervous of the state getting involved in any way in the budget. It's an additional wicket that I think, I don't know. Everyone I've talked to, I'm part of the Association of Town Finance Committee Board of Directors. Everyone we've talked to says, at all costs, avoid letting the state control your budget. So I understand people's hesitation and, desire to push it out, but that would be my concern, is that, once the state's in there, it becomes a process dealing with them.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Kevin. And what I was saying was, you're right. In the regional schools, it's the director who decides. But I see, I didn't know you guys were possibly striking a deal. So that's really great news. So, but
well, it's on our agenda tonight, Kate. We haven't voted on it yet.
Sorry to steal the thoughts.
Yeah.
To get ahead of us.
Yeah.
But.
No, it's fine. It's on our agenda. We have not discussed it as a board yet. So.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, so let's just talk about that, because the statute, the emergency legislation doesn't describe exactly what the director is going to take into consideration, but here's the situation when the state gets involved. And I agree, generally it's not a good idea, but generally the state is navigating between two or more parties who are totally not in agreement. So the good news is that if you're in agreement with Whitman, there are discussions that are had. So when we had a town who was taken by the state because they were unable to get a tent meeting decision, they were unable to get the various assessments through their town meetings, all of that. So the state came in, and what the state does is they don't just, willy-nilly pull the figures out of the air. They get information from both towns' accountants. They get information from the school committee. They get information from the boards of selectmen. And then from that information, they develop a budget. So here, if there's consensus as to what the budget's going to look like, that process will be much easier for the state, and they're pretty much going to approve what you want. Where
well, I mean, Kate, I think what Kevin's saying though is, so we're be realistic about where we are, because I don't want to overstate, but I don't want to understate either. At last night's school committee meeting, they set the budget. They set the budget based on compelling the towns to take a look at splitting the difference between statutory and per pupil for 1 year, with the proviso that the regional agreement committee would move to statutory. So this is there's a lot of contingencies here.
Yeah.
And so we've got to get the regional agreement lined up and in place. But for this year, what they're doing is proposing an amendment to the 1991 agreement that sets forth this compromise. And we have not, I have not anyway, physically seen the amendment. I don't know if John has. I don't think he has, but we did ask for it. So the devil's in the details, and obviously when we get it, we'll pass it by you because we need you to take a look at it. The school committee's council drafted it. And so, we need to make sure that we're looking at it from Hanson perspective. But so let's say that the amendment, it looks fine legally to you. The Board of Selectmen we need to vote to decide if we're going to support that and put it on the warrant and, and vote the amendment. And then obviously it's up to town meeting, right? So we don't know, either town could decide that they don't want to do this. And, for whatever reasons. And I think to Kevin's point, obviously the longer lead time we've got, the more opposition is likely to build. And there's some fairly strong voices in both towns, and sort of principally in principle in opposition to this. So, but that said, what we have seen is the school committee coming together and with all but one person saying that this is how they'd like to handle it this year. So that's a sign. And then I think that now the next move is ours and the Board of Selectmen in Whitman. So I guess to Kevin's kind of question, but also point is, what does all of that do? Let's say Whitman still has their meeting June 22nd, and it's all contingent on, the amendment passing, us also. So they have to adopt the amendment. We have to adopt the amendment. But if they meet on June 22nd and we kick the can down the road till July 15th or 13th or 20th, what does that all look like? Is it just a matter of that won't be effective until our town meeting adopts it as well?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So nothing's effective. Towns adopt it. So, they will just be ahead of you. I know normally you guys have your town meetings on the same night, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
So usually it's like text going back and forth. Did it go through? But here they'll just have to wait. And that's not uncommon where regional schools, especially bigger districts with multiple towns, it's not uncommon that these things happen on different nights. So it's a wait and see, so-and-so adopted, so-and-so didn't. And now we need to find out what the third is going to do. So yours will just be delayed beyond the fiscal year.
Okay, and similarly, if we get to a point where Mr. Sullivan and FinCom come to us and say, even with this amendment and even with the agreement, you know, and even with sharpening our pencil, which I hate that phrase, but it's used so often at this time of the year, that we still may have the need for an override. Again, I'm just trying to think about, you know, the domino effect here. The domino effect for us meeting later than June 30th is that at least for a temporary period of time, the district will not have a budget that's been voted on by both towns. And so the district also will be in a 1/12 budget until such time as both towns have agreed to adopt that budget. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And sorry, Laura, this is Kevin, and from what I understand, that would be a 1/12 of the full statutory method.
That is that true, Kate? I believe I have heard that too, Kevin, but I just want to ask Kate.
So so the emergency legislation doesn't specify, but the statutory method is what is used in the 1/12 budgets that occur in the normal course of business. If this pandemic weren't going along, if there were just a disagreement between the two parties. So I would take a hazard to guess, because we don't have any issued guidance yet from DESE or DLS on this. I would hazard to guess that yes, it would be based on the statutory.
For however long we have the delay between Whitman meeting and our meeting.
Right. And it's on just the monthly budget. So it's not the full assessment, it's the monthly budget.
Okay. Okay. So any other questions? Kenny?
Sorry. No, I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Matt?
I'm good for right now. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hickey?
I do appreciate Kevin's concern with the financial end of it. My concern is, quite honestly, I don't care when Whitman has their town meeting. I'm not worried about the citizens of Whitman. I'm worried about the citizens of Hanson, my health, my family's health, and every person that would be going to town meetings' health. I think I've made it clear in the past where I stand on the other issues, but you know, I with the motion on the floor, I put it out there for the 20th, and then Kenny seconded it.
Yep. And Mr. Bloss, did you have any other comments?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, then we'll move to the vote. It was moved and seconded, and we'll just do a roll call vote. So to postpone till the 20th of July. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay. Sean, I don't know if you need anything else from us, but in the interim, Mr. Stanbrook, I'm hoping that you and Mr. Keeley can work with the district to, you know, see what dates are available in July and August, and you know, in case we have to kick the can down the road again for August, and you know, maybe like look at some logistics around that, or the feasibility of holding it outside, or feasibility of holding it in the gym, that type of thing, because we've got a little bit of time to plan now.
Yes, I'll do that, and I'll also work tomorrow morning with town clerk to figure out the new dates for everything now that we have this new date of July 20th. The dates to post the warrant, dates to do whatever may have changed, the registrations, etc.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So anything else on that, Kate or Sean, before we move on?
I don't think so. I think that's it's a great move in the right direction. So hopefully we can hold it July 20th.
Okay. And do we still need to review and vote to place 2020 special and annual town meeting warrant articles, given the fact that our deadline has now, I believe, changed?
No, we don't, but the Proposition 2.5 override one, the next one, does have to be acted upon because there's still, the election hasn't moved. It's still slated for June 27th.
So walk me through this. We're not going to have the town meeting, and therefore people won't have the benefit of anybody at town meeting, the FinCom or the Board of Selectmen or the school committee, talking to them about the budget and why they vote for a 2.5 override. Is what happens here?
Yeah, that's tough. I'm just trying to think here really fast. What you could do is, and Beth may gasp here, but you could have a special election for simply the override vote. There's a cost associated with that.
Mr. Sullivan.
I don't know if you have the figures yet either.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say, Kate. Mr. Sullivan, given where we are now and fully appreciating that this is shifting sands galore, and that hoping that the budget we've been presented by the school district is not the final number, and that they may be able to bring that down a little bit, and we may have some things that we might be able to work on. What is the probability that we are going to need an override?
I would say unless you want a massive cut to services in the town of Hanson, there is a 100% chance we are going to need an override. We are running with the compromise from the school committee, still currently running an $865,000 deficit.
Okay.
So that's either massive cuts across the departments or an override of some level. In addition to the fact that the compromise last night, I'll say, is a stepping stone to next year, because even next year, we're still going to see a significant increase. We're going to see probably about the same increase because what they've done is sort of halved our burden. So we're going to take half the burden this year. So if we were to, even if we were to pass on an override this year and take the massive cuts across the departments, next year we're going to be even farther in the hole because new growth, new revenue is not projected to climb at the rate at which the change in the school committee budget would be, because it would go back to statutory next year. So we almost need, we need, in my opinion, and after talking to Todd today, we need some sort of override this year because it's needed to generate the additional revenue to close the gap next year so that we will even have the possibility of overcoming a smaller deficit. If we don't have an override at all, you know, we can go through and we can start making massive cuts across the departments, but we're going to be right back in the same position next year with either a bigger override or more massive cuts.
Okay, I don't think that that is where we want to go, and I think that's probably where you and Todd have landed. Okay, so Kate, to Mr. Hickey, did you have something that you wanted to say? I just saw your thing come off of mute.
I did, Laura. Thanks. I wanted to ask Kevin a question, and I wasn't sure if I heard the number correctly. Did you say 854,000 for this year?
$865,000 deficit right now. That's assuming that our at town meeting that the town accepts this 1-year compromise. If not, it jumps back to I think it was 1.6 roughly million.
Okay, so and you know, you're saying that we need the 2.5 override. So my question, Kevin, is what happens next year when we go full statutory, is it the 1.7 million?
No. The hope is that the additional revenue generated by an override that would automatically be added to next year, in addition to new growth, it may give us a more reasonable number to work with, where we've traditionally fallen out in the past. I mean, there's always a significant hill to climb, but and I can't give you an exact figure because I don't know how revenue will break out next year. We could see a downward trend in revenue because of all this COVID business. Businesses have been shuttered, going out of business. People aren't moving. People aren't building new houses. So there could be a downturn in revenue, which is a very real possibility. But I'm saying if we don't do this now, if we don't have some level of override this year, the necessity is going to be even greater. So maybe if we do a small one this year, maybe we have a minimum amount of cuts to do next year. But if we don't do anything this year, one, there's going to be just such a great loss of services that people are I think that's going to be the real problem is, we'll have to start laying people off. And then next year, I think with a small override of a certain number and some cuts, I think we can maintain the services this year. And
but then
it'll carry us into next year.
Next year, the number's going to stay roughly the same. Is that what you're saying?
Then when you say stay the same as what? As
this year?
Because remember, Jim, for operational override, it goes on forever. So you're limited in the amount that you can raise up to 2.5%, but you essentially bump that figure up forever when you do an operational override. So your capacity is more on a going forward basis, and then you add new growth on top of that.
And our hope is that it will mitigate it, Jim. It won't be the same. It won't be the same number. I can't tell you what the school's going to do. But our hope is that this override, as Kate mentioned, will bump the revenue higher next year. That it will, going forward, when we go into the next budget cycle, it will mitigate where we are.
So, Mr. Sullivan, you've mentioned drastic cuts. Can you give us an idea so that we know, and I know you're not prone to drama, so I know that when you say drastic cuts, you sincerely mean that. Give us an idea. If we don't have an override, what are we looking at? Are we talking about essential services? Are we talking about, what are we looking at here? How many people are we talking about?
I don't have a head count number yet, Laura, because I just got these numbers from the school last night. But I can tell you that 865,000 is a significant number to overcome without an override. You either have to, we have a couple of means to do that. You can slash budgets in sort of the amendment-based ones. You could, you could fund the transfer station and recreation for 6 months, and you'd get some savings there. But still, that's only a couple. What's the most you could take? A couple $100,000. So then you're still looking at 500,000 in budgets that can be cut. Some of these departments don't have the larger budgets. You have to look at the bigger departments. You have to look at the police and fire. They're the ones with the head counts. They're the ones with the largest share of the budget. So that's where you don't want to go. Is start. We've crept the head count over the last few years back up to an appropriate level. I think if you ask the fire chief and the police chief, they would both say they're pretty accurately staffed. But it becomes a math problem as to if you have to take $100,000 out of each department's budget. I would say that's probably a patrolman, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably what you pay a patrolman in salary and benefits, roughly. So you're talking about maybe, reducing headcount, and I don't think anyone wants that. So
no.
I think, we're looking at a couple different scenarios as to the level of override that we request, but to say we can not, I hate to do it. I'm not an override fan, but the situation we're in right now is dire enough that I believe it will be necessary. It is necessary.
Okay, I think that's, we appreciate you being so, candid with us and sharing. And I know these numbers are kind of, hot off the presses, but, and I also know you've been working the numbers every which way for the last, 6-7 months. So, it's just a matter of what was actually voted. So again, that those numbers may come down, but I mean, circling back, Kate, to placing the Prop 2.5, I think what you were saying was a special ballot,
Yeah,
which would cost us money, but
yeah, if you want it, I mean, there's no mandate that one come before the other, but if you wanted to have the information out there in a way that you felt was more appropriate for an election vote, you could have a special, which I don't know, Beth can probably tell you it's a few $1,000s to run a special, as well as more gray hairs for her, but.
What do you mean more?
You don't have any, Beth.
Thank you, Deb. First of all, this is an election year. I have a primary September 1st, and with this COVID stuff going on, they decided to do early voting, which they weren't going to, and now we're doing early voting the last 2 weeks of August for the September 1st. They want to do 3 weeks of early voting before the November one. I don't know when you think I could throw a special in between there. And I really, really don't want to do a dual election. If you people remember what I had to do the last.
Oh, we remember, Beth. Some of us were there with you. We remember. Okay. So what's
Hey,
our
Laura?
option? Kenny, yeah.
Could we just extend the election like we did with town meeting and have the election 2 weeks after town meeting like we normally do?
No, you can't.
Oh, okay.
So the legislation on elections is more limited, and although you can postpone, you can't postpone them after June 30.
So we've got the election as late as we could possibly. I mean, we could have done it like the 30th, but we did it the 27th. It was, like the last Saturday before we could postpone. So, I mean, I don't know, Kate. What are your thoughts on this? We need some real guidance.
So you can keep the question on the current election, and do information blasts and hold virtual meetings to try to educate the public in a way that you think might be helpful. That's one option. If Beth would have to jump in on the timing, but there is a possibility, I don't know if there's a successful possibility, but I guess we could go to court and try to extend the date of the election beyond June 30. So as I said earlier, we did that successfully to reduce a quorum requirement in another town. But I'm not sure if the court will be as receptive to that, because the quorum issue is one of local bylaw, right? That's established by local bylaw. It's not as concerning, I guess, as modifying a statute. So I would have some reservations to say we're definitely going to be successful on that. And then on top of Beth's prior statement, and I forgot, this is a big election year. There are a bunch of things going on in the clerk's office. Pushing it out to whatever 2 weeks from July 20 would still put her in that August time period where it may conflict with the early voting and all of those strains on the clerk's office. So I guess the best idea is to try to keep it on the annual town election as a question and try to educate the public regardless of town meeting. And my experience is for these kind of voter questions, the turnout is much different, obviously, than town meeting. And somehow those folks who don't go to town meeting get themselves educated. So there may be a possibility of just doing that remotely with PowerPoint presentations and the like, you know, and blast through, you know, some services of the town.
Okay, so let me just go around and kind of take a straw poll, if you will, of where people stand on this. I think based on what Beth has said, and you know, and I think you make a compelling argument. There are ways for us to get this information. We could have, you know, John do a cable show with Kevin and get some stuff to the papers. You know, I don't know. There's a variety of different, update our website. You know, there's a million different ways we could educate people. So, Mr. Dyer, thoughts?
I agree with Kate. I think there's ways to get that information out there. I like the idea of keeping it all in one election if possible, because that gives the option for people to do absentee ballots if they need to, or if they don't feel safe enough to go out to the elections. So I think that might be a good option. And then also just kind of keep our fiscal footprint as small as possible rather than having multiple elections.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Yep, I agree as well. There's
Okay.
definitely ways we can get the information out there. And, you know, maybe we can do between the boards, like at town hall, and then those electronic boards and Twitter, and then we've got the Facebook page coming up. So I think we can get the information out. Obviously, I prefer to have just one election too.
Yep. Mr. Hickey?
I agree. One election.
Okay. And Mr. Bloss?
I agree, one election.
Okay, so I don't think, so that brings us back to, I think you need us to vote this, Mr. Stanbrook, tonight?
Yes, we need an actual amount in the question.
Well, how would
I think we
know?
do anyway. It just, Beth is asking me to ask Kate if that's true. I think it's true, but.
But when is the election again? Remind me.
27th.
June 27th.
The 27th of
June.
May?
June.
Of June. Why are we needing to have that information tonight, John? Because for an election warrant to be posted, I think it's 7 days.
No, Kate?
Yeah.
The clerk needs to have it in writing 35 days prior to the election.
Okay.
I need a letter from the Board of Selectmen, 35 days. The 35 days will be the 23rd of this month. Tonight's the last time they meet before the 23rd. I don't know if they just need to send me a letter stating they're going to be putting up Proposition 2.5 on, and then they can vote next week, but the ballots go to print next Wednesday.
The ballots get printed next Wednesday. So I believe they just have to notify you, and then like with the warrant, we finalize that going forward. So closing the warrant, all of that stuff, we make edits, and until we need to actually physically send them to the printer, you say that has to be done by Wednesday?
Right, next Wednesday. So you guys, they could meet again next Tuesday and vote the number next Tuesday, because I have to have the wording for the ballot.
Perfect. Because I know there should be a lot more discussion on that figure, frankly, because how it's worded in the warrant right now is for the full assessment on the override. And we can talk about other options that are available to the town, which would change that figure. But we definitely don't have the figure tonight. So let's take a vote to put it on the election. And then we can finalize it before printing the wording of the language, et cetera, next week if need be.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
So moved by Matt.
Second by
Second.
Kenny.
Okay. Roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet. Aye. Okay. Moving on to Chairman Arlene Diaz from the Board of Health with an update. And Ms. Diaz, I'm assuming that you are caller 03. We don't have you identified, but are you there? Okay. We will take an item out of order and start us. Selena, you with us? Okay. Ms. Cohen, I know I saw you on, and this is regarding the reopening of Camp Kiwanee and wedding fees.
Yeah.
Thank
I'm
you
here.
for
Hi.
coming. Thanks for coming.
Okay, thanks for letting me. Okay, so we have had a request from a client that want to not pay for the rest of their wedding, the rest of the deposit, and they would like to just have a ceremony at the camp without a reception. So they've already paid for the deposit, which is half the amount, and they would like to not have to pay the rest of it since they're only going to be using the library for a short amount of time, which is the time of a to
Okay.
So-
Let me just see if anybody had any questions about that. Mr. Mitchell?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Mr. Dyer?
The only question is population-wise, and does that population fit within the guidelines of the governor?
Well, we got the request before those guidelines were here, and we're waiting to tell them, you know, what the guidelines are, and they have said that that's what they would do, whatever the guidelines permitted.
Okay. And how are we going to enforce that? Who's going to oversee that?
We're gonna have to have our recreation director do that.
Okay. Mr. Hickey, any questions?
No, actually, Matt asked the question and Diane answered it perfectly as long as the people, you know, fall within the guidelines.
Okay.
Right. I feel so badly for these poor people that have planned weddings, but so
Mr. Bloss?
No, Mr. Bloss agrees, although I'm just curious, Diane, when is this wedding?
I'm sorry, Mr. Bloss, I didn't quite hear the question. There was an echo. I apologize.
Nope, I'm just curious, when is the wedding?
I think I believe they said at the end of May.
All right, good luck.
I know.
Okay. So you need us to vote to,
Allow them to have a reception only and to not have them pay the rest of the deposit for a wedding.
and do you have the dollar amounts for that, just so we can?
I think the wedding was on a Saturday, so no, it was a Friday. So I think it's $1,500.
Okay.
Can I correct
Laura?
it? Ceremony only, not reception, right?
Yes,
Hey, that's what I was just gonna say.
Yep.
Yep.
so ceremony
Okay.
only, no reception. So they would like to not have to pay the rest of the deposit.
Mr.
Thank you.
Hickey, did you have something?
I'm sorry, Laura, you're talking to me?
Yes, I saw you come off of mute, so I thought you might want to.
I actually have a question for Kate then, because where Wes just asked, it's at the end of May. We're going to have Billy Boyle there to make sure that they don't have more people than they're supposed to have. So my question, Kate, would be to you is, would Hanson be held liable if anyone gets sick, whether they have under the amount or over the amount? Is Hanson held liable in any way?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so essentially what happens for enforcement of the number of people limitations is the police comes in and they come in and they disperse the folks. There's typically not a fine associated with it. So what I suggest is, because at the end of May, we're still at this very, very beginning phase. So I would suspect that we would have to limit it to 10 people or fewer than 10 people. And we'll just have to ensure it happens. But there haven't been really fines. What happens is they ask people to disperse.
No, but I think Jim is saying if for some reason they violate it and say they go crazy on us and have 50 people or something and they infect each other, is the town going to be held liable because we didn't enforce it or because people did the wrong thing there? That's what I understood him asking. I might be wrong.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Correct.
So from the virus. Oh, good grief. Okay. So what we can do is I can work with the recreation director and do a special waiver and release. We already have a pretty strong special waiver and release, but under the circumstances, it might make sense to broaden that to specifically call out the coronavirus as a potential risk that we normally didn't have infectious diseases under our waivers, but now it makes sense to broaden that.
Okay.
Laura, this is John.
Yes, John.
The information I have is the wedding's going to be scheduled for August 1st. So do I have the wrong info on that, Diane, or?
No, you might not. I could have been. I don't have the paper in front of me. I was never given the paper, and I thought it was coming up before then. But if you have paperwork that says August, then it must be August. If you have the paperwork, I was not given any paperwork on it.
Oh, okay. No, I just had it here, and I double checked it, and it says here August 1st. This is from. I think still what we're talking about is still valid though, because we may not be over it in August.
Right, and I think I like the idea of having having indemnification, being indemnified against it. I don't think it's going to hurt for us to have additional protections in there. And who the heck knows what's going to happen between now and August? I mean, it's anybody's guess. So, okay. So with John and get that additional documentation, and we'll get that over to the Recreation Commission. Really, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to use it prospectively, until we get through this whole situation.
Will do.
Okay.
Mr. Dyer, did you have something? I thought you were unmuting yourself.
Yes, Ms. Chair. My quick question is, would we all be open money?
I actually have well, we probably do need to have that on there. Given the guidance that was issued yesterday, we've got the campground, we've got the beach, they all fall under different, different rules. We've got the service and facilities up there. We've got Botieri Field. We've got, the list just goes on and on and on. I think we do need to vote to reopen Camp Kiwanee. That's what we've got on the agenda, but there's a lot of moving parts to that, and it's not a one size fits all in terms of the dates. For instance, the campground, we'll have to work with the Recreation Commission on whether it can open up and when, because there's a lot of guidance on what has to be enforced. Has to be single families and single cabins. I don't even know if anybody's going to want to rent this year, given the environment, but maybe they will. And so we'll have to think about that. We'll have to think about the lodge. And whether that can be reopened, which that would have been permitted to be open during all of this, but again, limited to the 10, and to the extent we don't have a staff there that's able to monitor that, that's a problem. And then the beach is able to be opened along with fishing and boating on May 25th. What's less clear, and Kate, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, is whether the swimming lessons, and I don't even know if we're going to be in a position to offer those this year or where we are with that, but would the swimming lessons fall under almost that summer camp phase 2 of like recreational activities offered for fees? Or where exactly would that fall?
Yeah, and so the guidance is still obviously unfolding because, you know, the governor just obviously issued this order, but I would think that it would fall under summer camp activities, the swimming lessons, and whether or not you want to be more strict than the governor is a decision you would have to make. But because especially with swimming lessons, you tend to be in very close contact with folks and spitting out water and doing whatever kids do when they're learning how to swim. But I would say that qualifies as summer camp.
Okay.
On your motion for this wedding, you can also make it contingent because we don't know, and I'm glad to hear, frankly, that it's August 1st. That makes me much happier. But we don't know whether or not we're going to face another spike and circumstances would change. So what you can do is say contingent upon, and I'm not sure where this woman is intending on holding the ceremony, if it's a beach ceremony or if it's in the lodge or I don't know what.
It was lodge.
The lodge, okay, contingent upon the lodge remaining open as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Um,
So,
okay.
Go ahead, Diane.
No, go ahead. I can save my question for after this motion.
Okay, because there's a lot to unpack here, Diane.
I know.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to reduce the fee to $1,500, or not charge the additional money, whatever, for them to have a ceremony but no reception in August, contingent upon them being in compliance with the then regulations, because we don't know what they are, and with the lodge being open.
Okay, I'm writing it down. Yep,
Well, no, I'm entertaining a motion, so.
I know.
So moved by Matt.
Seconded by Kenny.
Jim. Beecher.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
and Mr. Bloss.
Aye.
And Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, Diane, so you're good to go on that. And then as far as the reopening of Camp Kiwanee, we do need to make a motion. The beach is technically allowed to be open May 25th, but do you have lifeguards and everything and infrastructure in place there for the beach to be opened on May 25th?
Okay, so that is what I would like to talk to the board about right now, is that I know the camp technically cannot open until the 25th. Is there any way that we could allow caretakers to work with social distancing, masks provided, whatever regulations anybody would want, so that we can prepare to open on time with our normal beach schedule of the last day of school? We don't want to change the opening of the Cove. We want to be respectful of remote learning and only open when school is technically out. But there is a lot of maintenance that needs to be done at the camp to prepare it for opening. And if we can adhere to social distancing, we would like the board to allow us to have caretakers on getting ready for a proper opening.
All right, and they'd be just kind of like cleaning up the grounds and prepping and making
We had
everything.
Right, we had a lot of groundwork done, trees, which I know we were all aware of, and branches, and just cleaning, getting everything ready.
Okay. Thoughts, Mr. Mitchell?
I'm totally fine with that. I think that the kids being locked up at home, that they're going to really need the camp this year. They're really going to need the Cove. So I'm totally fine.
Okay, Mr. Dyer?
Nope, I think that would be great to have the caretakers get back to work to do some prep before the season.
Okay, Mr. Hickey?
Well, absolutely, the caretakers need to get in there, get back to work, and get the camp cleaned up. The opening of the Cove, I'm not too sure about. We just moved our town meeting back because we think we're going to have more than 100 people.
Right.
I'm not sure how many people are going to be at the Cove on a daily basis.
You know what, Mr. Hickey? I think we don't have to vote to open up the Cove today. We can put that on our agenda and make a decision, you know, as we get closer to the date that, you know, Diane, what kind of lead time are you looking at? What do you need to know in order to, you know, like, do you need 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month? I mean, what do you need?
Obviously, as much time as possible. I have concerns about opening the Cove in regards to the regulations for social distancing, which I think we're probably going to have to limit people at the Cove. We're probably going to have to go to a day pass system only rather than selling season tickets or season passes. And I'm concerned about the swimming area, which gets extremely crowded, and what those regulations look like. So
You may also have to do reservations, Diane, because you're going to have to keep track of who's there.
I have already put that into play with our recreation director, sort of having a in real time sign up sheet online.
Yeah.
And signing the day before or whatever, and having slots ready for like you sign up for parent teacher conferences almost. And so I would like to have that in place should that be what we need. So as much lead time as possible to set up for those kinds of situations would be ideal.
Okay, but I think to Mr. Hickey's point, and I think you've heard from this entire board, we would rather be safe than sorry. So we're going to be prudent about this. You know, I don't think we need to vote about this tonight. I think we can maybe, I don't know, vote about it or at least talk about it next week. And by then we may have some more guidance and some more details around things. You know, for instance, like I know they're not allowing playgrounds to open until June 8th, like that phase there. They're not allowing any sports teams to do anything except for practice, and even then it has to be social distance and small groups, and no games until like the third phase of everything. So, you know, we're getting, even though we haven't gotten specific guidance on this exact situation, based on what, you know, Kate's saying, this would probably be considered more like summer camp type of thing if you're going to do lessons, which I don't even know if you are. And so that's all more like late phase 2, late phase 3 type of situation. But you know, Kenny's right. The kids are bouncing off the walls, and obviously they're going to be wanting to do something. So we're going to have to balance all these competing needs. And I guess that's my long-winded way of saying I don't think we need to take a vote tonight, nor necessarily should we, because we don't really even have the guidance that we need. But we'll plan on putting it on the agenda next week, and hopefully if we've got more information, then, you know, we can take a thoughtful vote. Mr. Boss.
Diane, I'm just, as a former lifeguard and rec member, I'm just wondering, how much lead time do you need to hire? Have you hired anyone? Is this in process?
It is in the process. We have gatekeepers. We have someone that applied for the beach director. We've, Billy Boyle has spoken with lifeguards. We have 7 lifeguards that are wanting to come back should the Cove open. So we do have a staff, but getting back to the point of lead time, again, that's why we would need as much as possible. And I know that's obviously contingent upon the governor's protocols. So we do have staff ready to go. But as far as swimming lessons, we're not sure about, because swimming lessons require WSI, water safety instructor licenses and certifications, and we would have to possibly, as in the past, train people. So I'm not sure all of that's going to be possible this year.
Well, plus you've got the additional, safety protocols and all of that I don't even know how you're going to do in swimming when you've got a little person that's going under,
Exactly.
So
Even our swimming area, I understand, when you have a wide open oceanfront beach, you can probably blow a whistle and have people move far away from each other. But I'm not sure that's going to work out with the established swimming area that we have at the Cove, which is, roped off.
Yeah. Okay. So for tonight, I think we agree at some point things are going to open up and things have clearly been accruing in terms of work that needs to be done there. So I will entertain a motion to allow the Recreation Commission to have the caretakers come on site and do some maintenance and cleanup work in preparation for whenever people are going to be permitted to be there.
Laura? Also going to allow the rec director to be able to come back as well, right?
Well, I would assume he's going to have to oversee the staff. That might be a presumption on my point.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second by
Second.
Matt.
Okay. Roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, great. Hopefully that got you at least 90% of what you needed, Diane, and I know there's a lot of moving parts. So, we'll just keep in touch with John and have Billy keep in touch with John. And as things evolve and more guidance is issued, we'll keep taking it up. But we'll put this on the agenda for next week to talk more about the beach. We may or may not be able to take a vote at that point, but at least we'll have it on the agenda.
I understand.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. You guys are so organized. I'm very impressed. Have a good night.
All right, take care. And Miss Diaz, are you on the phone with us?
I am.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for joining us. Did you want to give us a Board of Health update?
Well, one of the things we did talk about at our meeting was the opening of Camp Kawani and the waterfront, and we didn't have an issue with it as long as all the rules that were in place were adhered to. And because we do have this moving part, we were concerned about how you would handle just the things that Diane talked about. How many people could you have? Would you have a pass? But I'm sure that they're going to take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
The other issue that we wanted to talk about, and I don't know if Sean is still on the line, is the COVID testing.
The COVID testing site and the COVID-19 testing site in Hanson, which is a separate agenda item. Mr. Keeley, are you available to discuss this with us?
I am, and actually, caller number 4 is, I believe, Ann Kiesling, who's the director of the Bedford Research Foundation. And just as a background, I'm on the board of directors for Bedford, and I have been since 2007. We got to know each other when we passed a big stem cell research law here in Massachusetts, and Ann was instrumental in that. But one of the things that Ann has done, and she's available for any questions, but I'll just kind of introduce the issue. Permission to hold a COVID test event on Friday here in Hanson, and the price would be $65 per person, and they would get an insurance form, which they would be able to be reimbursed about $50. I believe it's $50. So it's a very low cost test. It's well under what it costs the foundation. But Ann has been doing these tests in Bedford, her hometown, She's been also working with the CDC and with the Department of Public Health for the state to do tests for various hospitals and for nursing homes. And what she tried to do, what she would like to do, is to expand her tests of just individuals in towns, make sure that people don't have COVID, and if they do and are asymptomatic, know to self-quarantine and stay away from people. It's been very successful in Bedford. What we're looking to do is to have a 3-hour event, 3.5-hour event at the McQuan School. I spent quite a bit of time talking to Arlene a couple of days ago, and we thought that if we set up a tent outside of the McQuan School for a couple of hours, people would register online ahead of time. They would get a number and a slot when they could show up to be tested. We would have a nurse present who would be able to order the test, and a technician from Bedford who is very skilled at giving the tests. And what we would do is we would call out people according to their number and their reservation. They'd come into the tent, they'd get tested. It takes just a few moments to test, and then they could get back in their car and drive off. You know, as everybody knows, in McQuan, you can enter one way and depart the next. We wouldn't be tying up any space on the streets, and I'm very hopeful it wouldn't cause any sort of traffic problem.
And what about bathroom facilities, Sean? Because as you know, that building's all been shut down, the water's shut off and all that.
Right. We weren't anticipating needing any bathroom facilities.
Okay, I thought your original message on this had indicated that we needed to do something in that way, but I'm glad to hear that that isn't required. And I'm sure that Ann can answer this question, but you know, some of the things that kind of rattle around in my brain are, you know, this information is going to be, you know, kept privileged. It's, you know, HIPAA information. It's not information that's going to be sold or shared with anybody or used for any other purpose. You know, those are the types of things I get a little anxious about, little big brother type of stuff.
Right. I'm glad. Thank you for considering this. This is Ann Kiesling. I'm delighted to meet you. The Bedford Foundation is a CLIA licensed lab, and HIPAA requirements are part of that CLIA license.
Okay, great.
So
And
Ann,
thanks for thinking of us.
Yeah, the only information, well, thanks, Sean. The only information that gets shared is with the Department of Public Health. They want to know everybody who tests positive.
Okay, which any testing site would be required to provide them with that information.
That's right.
Okay.
Now, as more and more testing sites open up, it's possible that this sort of community approach may not be necessary, but what the Unitarian Church in Bedford has discovered is that once you start doing some kind of community and public testing, it raises awareness of the idea, oh, we should do that. Everybody should do that. And so the more people get tested, the more we're going to know who doesn't know they have it, and the faster it's going to get ahead of this curve.
So, Ann, this is really this isn't just, oh, gee, I think I'm sick, I want to go get tested. This could be, gee, I'm curious if I'm asymptomatic and I'd like to just go get tested. But you're not doing an antibody test. This is the actual test for COVID.
That's right. This is a SARS-2 virus test. And the antibody tests are coming online. They're all very, very expensive right now. We're asked that a lot, but right now they're pretty expensive and a little quirky, and nobody knows exactly what it means. What we do know is that probably at any point in time, 1% to 2% of the population is infected and does not know it.
Okay, that's interesting. Ian, if I could just impose on you a bit I'm just going to go around to the rest of the board and see if they've got any questions or thoughts.
Also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this would be a great opportunity for our emergency responders to be tested as well, police, fire, and EMTs.
That's a good point. And if they were to be required to be tested or we were to offer it, John, is that something that the town could pick up the bill for, or how would we do that? Because I feel like that benefits everybody.
I think we could pay for it out of the insurance budget. I can, I double check with.
Because wouldn't that be
The-
reimbursable by FEMA, the FEMA, stuff? Wouldn't that be an expense that we could submit for reimbursement?
Laura?
One of the things that I would like to add is that we're able to offer this because of the governor's task force. So in early March, the governor's task force got very involved with any CLIA licensed lab that could possibly begin to pick up this testing. This is not something that we were doing. We do a lot of this type of test for HIV infections, so it was easy for us to transition. But the governor has really been very enthusiastic about getting as many people tested as possible. So I have a feeling that whatever funds might be available to Hanson from the governor's office, they would be delighted.
Okay. Sean, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay. Arlene, did you have something? I thought you were.
I did. I know right now our first responders can go to Foxborough, and I know that that's where they're being sent. Police and fire and any essential workers can go to Foxborough, I think, at no charge. And I think that's where they've been going.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks,
Just so that
Arlene.
you're aware of it. Just so
Yeah.
that you're aware.
No, that's good to know. Okay. Kenny, did you have any questions for Ian or Sean?
So this would be just a one-day thing for 3 hours? Is that what I heard?
Yes, it's been remarkable how quickly we can get people through. People are assigned. For instance, today they collected 55 tests from 10:30 to about 12:30. It took about 2 hours. And that's because people are assigned a number. They're assigned a time to come. There's somebody there making sure that there's nobody collecting anywhere. People stay in their cars and they put a number actually in the windshield. It's a little bit like going to the drive-in theater. And somebody lets them know when it's their time to go. And the medical team is just very skilled. Everything is pre-labeled. Nobody has to sign anything. No paperwork is passed. It's all done and prepared online beforehand. So it goes very quickly. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to get tested.
And Kenny, to your point, I mean, Bedford has been doing this on a weekly basis. We could perhaps do the same thing, and once people get to know about it, maybe we'd start drawing people from Whitman or Pembroke or Halifax as well. But we could make this a weekly thing, I think, as far as Ann is concerned.
Right. We have
Like who would oversee this? Like the fire department? Would the police be involved? Have they been notified? Who would be the one that would oversee this?
Yeah. We've notified the folks in Bedford. The way it's staged and paced out, there just isn't any increase in traffic or no. I mean, the fire, of course, where we do it in Bedford is right across the street from the fire department. So that was easy for them to watch. But you have people come, cars come 3 or 4 at a time is all, and then they leave. So everybody knows up front that this is going to be, you're going to be there like 5 or 10 minutes. There's no lines. There's no lineup. People have been amazingly cooperative.
And Sean, I think you did tell Chief Mix about this, right? I don't know if you reached out to Jerry Thompson about it or not, but
I haven't reached out to Jerry, but Arlene was going to talk to Chief Mix just to make sure that there was no problem.
Okay, Arlene, were you chiming in there?
I was chiming in to say that I had, and he did not think that there would be any kind of a traffic problem or that it would create a problem. I did reach out to him.
And has anybody thought to reach out to Kenny's point to Chief Thompson?
I have not, but I could.
Well, I just want to make sure we're being inclusive and not excluding anybody from the, from weighing in on that.
Right.
So, okay. Kenny, are you all set with your questions?
No, a couple more. And then the bathroom thing. So in Bedford, you guys don't have bathrooms? What if somebody's waiting in line and has to go to the bathroom?
There isn't any wait in line. I mean, they're sitting in their cars. There isn't really any lineup. You're given a specific time to show up. People have been remarkably cooperative. The whole event takes like 5 or 10 minutes for somebody's time. So no, I mean, it's held in the very front of a church, and the church, of course, is closed.
Okay.
Okay. And then the last statement is, I looked up yesterday on mass.gov. If you go within 12 or 14 miles, there's like 7 different testing sites close to Hanson. One in East Bridgewater, one in Pembroke, Abington. Do we really think that this is a need to have in the town of Hanson?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I mean,
what we've discovered is that when you make it a community event, then people begin to realize, oh, I don't have to be sick to get tested. The idea is simply to find out who's infected and is not sick. So once that opened up, I have my view of this, because we really do research here, is that once we're past the push, all of those other testing sites are going to be utilized, and we're not going to have to do this anymore. But it's as if you have to raise awareness that the only way we're going to get ahead of this thing is to get everybody, as many people as possible, tested, which is the governor's goal too. It's so you don't have to be, people tend to think they need to go get tested if they're sick or if they've been exposed. All of a sudden, if you have this community testing event, at least that's what's happened in Bedford. All of a sudden people realize, oh, testing is probably more useful than wearing a mask.
okay.
Laura?
Yes,
Laura?
Arlene.
I just wanted to chime in and say all of the other testing sites, Penny, you have to be referred generally by a physician, and this would be more of a self-referral because you're paying for it for yourself.
Oh, that's a good point, because the other ones, don't you have to, essentially you have your primary care physician needs to feel as though you're sick enough to get.
Or your job, if you're an essential worker, your job has to set it up for you. You can't just say, oh, I think I might have been exposed. I want to make sure I don't have the virus. There's no place that you can go where you can self-refer. You have to have someone else. Has to refer you. You have to doctor's order, or like the essential workers, their job have to set up the appointments for them.
And can I also point out a really important point is that Bedford has roughly a 24-hour turnaround on these tests. So anybody who's infected would get a call from someone from Bedford within a day, and everybody else will get a letter stating that they're not infected, and everybody gets a letter with an insurance form that gives reimbursement for $50.
Okay.
One more question, Laura. I'm sorry. How do people pay? How do they pay the $55? Do they pay online?
Online.
Want to make the town of Hanson wouldn't be on the hook for any fees or?
No, she's saying online, Kenny. When they register, they pay.
They pay online.
Ahead of time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
everything, all the paperwork is done ahead of time. So all people do is go in, they sit down in a chair, which gets scrubbed off between each person. They get their nose swabbed, and everybody says, see ya, and they leave. So there's no forms to fill out. You don't even really talk to very many people. You just go in and do it and leave. There's a couple of volunteers that are really good at kind of, making sure everybody feels comfortable and that they know where they're going and all of that. So hopefully Sean would maybe be willing to do that on Friday.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Dyer, any questions or comments or thoughts?
I think this is a great opportunity for the community, as long as there's appropriate certifications and credentials, and that we have the sign off from the 2 chiefs. I think this will be a great opportunity. So thank you.
Okay, great. Mr. Hickey, thoughts, comments, questions?
Hi, Ann. Will this be used for tracking?
I'm sorry, what do we use for what?
Will this be used for tracking? The governor had talked exclusively about testing people and then using it as tracking so that if they do come in contact with someone that has it or someone that doesn't have it, they will be able to track it.
Well, if somebody tests positive, that's exactly what it's for. So the
Okay.
department of as a CLIA licensed lab, we are obligated that this is all being done under an FDA emergency authorization for labs that were already licensed. And so part of that guidance from the FDA is that we're obligated to report everybody who's positive to the Department of Public Health. And then that Department of Public Health reports that information to the local Board of Health, wherever the person lives. And then the local Board of Health picks up that ball and makes the phone calls and figures out who their contacts are. And now I think the contacts are being encouraged to go get tested. Until about a week ago, contacts were all encouraged to just shelter in place for 14 days. But now I think they're being encouraged to go get tested, make sure whether they're positive or negative. It's all about testing.
Thank you. And I knew the answer to the question before I asked, but I figured you would be able to say it much more eloquently than I could. As Sean, you know what, Sean? I looked up, I actually called my insurance provider and the test would be covered in full.
Yeah, they're mandated. They're mandated now to cover it, right?
Yes. And that's exactly what he explained to me on the phone.
Right.
My last statement would be that you had earlier said that you were able to test 55 people in 2 hours. So with the 3-hour window that we have here, we would be looking to test roughly 80 people.
You could, right.
Am I correct?
100 people is about as many as the lab can manage in one testing situation because all of the materials are pre-labeled. So the lab has to get everybody's information online. You need name, date of birth, and town that you live in. And then all of that information, it's done ahead of time. They're logged into the lab's computer so that when you get there, you've got a little plastic sleeve that has that person's test vessel in it, and they get swabbed. Their swab gets put into the sleeve. The sleeve is held up, and the people who are doing the testing say, "This is you. What is your date of birth?" And then that's it.
And,
so no, I mean the value.
I'm sorry.
The value is everything is done online beforehand, so that you don't have to worry about who's touching what.
So then, would you be able to tell that if more than 100 people, let's say we decide to do this and get a date, and you have 250 people that want to do this, but you can only accommodate 100.
Right, then you'd simply set up the following Friday.
Yeah, we'd do another date. She's just starting with one date now, just kind of see how it goes, whether she's got the interest. And again, this is not mandated testing, just to be clear. We're not mandating that anybody get tested. This is purely voluntary. Whomever it is that wishes to get tested, wants to know, and just maybe didn't want to have to drive to wherever, to do it or make an appointment or talk to their primary care, physician. This is purely voluntary. And it's just a convenience, really. Okay, Mr. Hickey, anything else on that?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Mr. Bloss, any questions, thoughts, or comments?
Let's do it.
Okay, I like your enthusiasm. All right, so let's move to a motion. John, was there wanted to do, was it this Friday?
Yeah, we were thinking about this Friday. I believe we have a website ready to go to start registration, and I've been talking to Josh Cutler about it, help publicize it. And I think perhaps this Friday would be the best time.
Okay, now I do want to say this is, contingent upon Chief Tommy part of this conversation, and I do just want to make sure that he's included in it. And I think whatever, and I can't imagine he would object as, you know, in his role. I think he'll probably see the value in it. But I also want to say that although we're going to probably put the motion on the table to allow this to happen on Friday, I think the way that the motion should be structured is such that it's sort of open-ended and on to work with John if the additional, to Mr. Hickey's point, if additional dates are needed. I don't think we should have to vote every time that they want to come back and do this. So that said, I will entertain a motion.
So moved by Matt.
Second by Jim.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. And thank you so much, Ann and Sean, for thinking of us and for bringing this. And it will be a nice value added for folks that, you know, that might be anxious or haven't had a chance to get tested and they just want to get some of those answers. So it's wonderful and we really appreciate it.
Oh,
Terrific.
good. Glad to hear it. Yep. See you Friday.
All right, thank you. Moving on to Mr. Stanbrook, reopening of town buildings draft plan. What say you?
Thank you. So I worked, last week I was working on my plan, and then of course the governor came out on Monday, and I had to scramble because I've been getting all yesterday and today several new updates from the Board of Health. Gil Amato and Teresa have been coming down and giving me you know, different things that are coming out, some guidance that's coming from the governor. But this is kind of an overview of what I'm thinking. As far as this, again, this is for town hall. The library I went over last week with the chief, police chief Mix, and took a look at the Council on Aging and the library, tried to decide, you know, how we could do social distancing and plexiglass placement and, you know, how many people could come in and out at the same time and how we could get things rolling on that. On the library side, Library Director Stolford's come up with a great plan that she's going to be talking about with the library trustees, and I'll be sending that along to you later on. On the Council on Aging, quite frankly, it's such a dicey situation with the older population and this disease. I'm very, very wary of trying to open up anything right away with the Council on Aging until we get it exactly right. So that I've kind of just, you know, what I'm thinking is kind of letting up on that for a while, that to stay closed with more to follow as things progress.
Yeah, and you know, John, today on that call with the Lieutenant Governor, they specifically had asked, because it was all different, you know, it was all different selectmen and folks from different towns, and they specifically asked about the senior center, and they said they're still working on guidelines, that they didn't think that the senior center would be one of the, in maybe even like up to phase 3 type of thing. For the library though, May 25th, they can start doing curbside. So I don't know what their plans are, and I'm hoping maybe at our next meeting that we could have, if it's convenient for them, if we could have the library director Karen Stolfer and or the board of library trustees, and then if we could have Mary Collins, and maybe they could just tell us what's going on and where their heads are at, or what we could do to help them. Especially Mary, I know she's, you know, got the Meals on Wheels, and she's got that vulnerable population. So I'm hoping we can put them on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, that Greer says yes. Done. But yeah, and just real quickly on the town hall portion of it, again, I was using 4 phases like the governor's plan or the governor's task force plan. The first phase would be employees only under what I'm thinking anyway, with no public interaction. And that would probably start next Tuesday, I would think, where we would start on this, where employees would come back on a staggered basis. We're going to put up signs on doors and bathrooms, plexiglasses is being installed. We're getting that put in as we speak this week. Employees with any health issues would make arrangements with me to work from home. We have the I don't know what you call it, like a beamer thing that you can check someone's temperature. I'm pointing at Greer right now. What is it? A thermometer checker from distancer thing? Whatever that's called, that temperature check thing that you can beam and get someone's temperature. We have we are going to be coming in. I'd like to check town hall employees for fevers when they come in. And obviously, beforehand, they would not, they wouldn't be allowed to enter the building if they did have a fever. Masks would have to be worn anytime within 6 feet of another coworker, and that would be, we have masks here that we can issue to town employees. A frequent hand sanitization would have to occur again. We're loading up on sanitizer as we speak here at the town hall. Excuse me. Going to have some frequent cleaning of the bathrooms and any touch surfaces as per the Department of Public Health guidelines. We've got weekly fogging of this town building and several other town buildings to kill viruses going on. We probably have to step that up to a lot more frequently than weekly. Any money that's handled or any public correspondence would have to be worn. Gloves would have to be worn. And again, the guidance is to discard the gloves after every use. You don't keep them on. The meetings would still be held remotely via GoToMeeting or Zoom. Again, no employees to show up to work while showing any fever or other symptoms, or when exposed to someone that is symptomatic. Again, that's the Department of Public Health guidelines, and the public would still not be allowed in the building. So, I mean, what I'm thinking is let's get everybody back as we can in a staggered fashion, employee-wise, and then we can go through like a shakedown cruise almost of, okay, where are the points where there's interaction, where it's difficult to keep the guidelines going. I don't think we're going to really know that. There are going to be things that we can't possibly think of until we actually are in the building and we start interacting. And then we say, okay, several people are here at a certain amount of time. We need to clean that particular area more. Or there's no way that this particular office employees can stay 6 feet apart. What can we do in order to mitigate that? So I'd like to, slowly get rolling without the public coming in this phase one till we can get it rolling and get it worked out. And then with phase two would be a limited public interaction. And again, there's no timeline on this. I don't know how long that will take for phase one or these different phases. We'll see how it goes as we move along. All the above that I was talking about with phase one would be going on, except for the buildings will be open in a limited fashion to the public. The public could enter when there's no other means of communication that can accomplish their task. So, for example, if someone were to want to come in because they want to pay their excise tax bill, we would offer that you can either put the excise tax bill outside in the lockbox, you can pay it online. You don't have to physically come in and do that. Or, for example, something like a marriage certificate where you have to show up in front of the town clerk and you have to make certain oaths and affirmations before you do that. That is something that can only be done in person. That's the type of thing that we in phase two that we would allow and have allow to continue on. Again, the public would be able to enter and exit through the lower door here only, and the public would be able to use the first floor bathroom only. The bathrooms on the second and third floor would be for employees. Again, the public would be asked to wear masks at all times. Again, if the public, we'd like to try to get a temperature check of everyone coming into the building, and I'm not interested in trampling on people's constitutional rights, but I also have to think that, if you have a fever, we don't want you to come into the building and infect other people. Initially, I would think we would have to have a police detail as a gatekeeper at the door to kind of, making sure that what we're doing or what we're trying to do is enforced properly, ensure the need and the mask compliance and the other things that we're trying to do. And then with required public hearings They could be held if we could figure out a way to socially distance, and the crowd limits could work. Again, right now, the crowd limit is still, the public, I guess, is a limit of 10. It's difficult to have a public hearing if we're limited to 10. If that were to lift, then maybe we could do something in phase 2. But otherwise, there wouldn't be any public use of this particular building. Any optional meeting would be done virtually as we're doing it now, if possible. Phase 3, whenever phase 2 is gone on, again, there's no time limit. Phase 3 would be all the previous phases, but then more access of the public to the building. Required public hearings and optional hearings can be held in the building if we can keep the social distancing and crowd limits working, and the public could use the building. And then in phase 4, whenever that is, would be what I'm calling the new normal. We keep whatever the guidelines are that we're required to keep from the Board of Health and the governor's office, along with the DPH, the Department of Public Health. We'd be accessing those. We'd be using those, and then whenever the social distancing, the crowd limits, or the mask requirements are lifted by the governor, then we'd be lifting them here in the town, as long as the Board of Health allowed us to do that. And then public meetings would resume as normal. So that was kind of just a brief overview of where I was going with it, and I wanted to see if anyone had any comments or questions, or I'd like to hear anyone's input on what they thought.
So John, I thank you for putting that together. It's extremely comprehensive. And again, on that call today with Lieutenant Governor Polito, people had asked, well, what can we do about opening up town hall? And she said, look, we're right in the middle of working on our own guidelines for opening up the state buildings and what those rules of. And they're also working on, I guess, taxpayer-facing, public-facing services through the RMV. And she said that they're aggressively working on those. So probably those would be released in the next week or so. And that might be something we can leverage. But I think you've probably covered most of what they're going to end up having in there. But you never know. They might have some other, caveat in there that we didn't think about. But I think you did a great job. And the rest of the board. Thanks, Mr. Dyer.
Nope, it sounded great. Thanks. Thank you very much, Greer and John, for putting that together.
Mr. Mitchell.
I agree. Thanks, John and Greer. It sounded good.
Mr. Hickey.
John, you talk so fast. I didn't hear you mention Camp Kiwanee as one of the town buildings. So Billy and Dory could basically go back with no public access.
Yes, I didn't mention them because I knew that they were on the agenda earlier in the night, and I didn't want to say one thing or another because I didn't know how the discussion would go. But I would, and I would think that they would be able to come back under a limited, social distancing and masks, etc. But I would assume that they could come back without any public access.
Yep.
Okay, thanks for all the work that you two have done on this.
Mr. Bloss?
John Greer made fascinating reading. Thank you.
Okay, John, you didn't need a vote on this, right? I mean, it's obviously unanimous that we think you guys did a fantastic job and you're on the right track. So,
okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Discuss public forum. I'm not really particularly sure exactly what this was, other than I think it may be what you just alluded to a few minutes ago, Mr. Stanbrook, in thinking about some of the land use boards and the need for particularly like planning, conservation, where they've got to have hearings, and those don't necessarily play out really, really well in the virtual world, where particularly if you've got, you've got and the like that you need to show, and people have got to discuss virtually. Again, I hate to keep saying this, but this was an extremely informative call today. On the call today with Lieutenant Governor Polito, somebody had asked, well, do you see, the restriction on the number of people being lifted so that boards and committees can have hearings and forums and all that stuff? And they said, no, we don't see that getting lifted, unless it's organically lifted as we move forward with the rest of, like any public gathering type of thing. But what they had suggested was that maybe in the interim, that people could do almost like a hybrid type of thing where they would have 1 or 2 people from the board or committee in the office, again, socially distancing, and then using the virtual technology, be able to show plans and that type of thing to everybody else on the phone. And, things have evolved quite a bit now. So really almost anybody at home can share a screen and knows how to do that. And, could still have a very productive meeting. So I think that's why we had that on there. But Kate, did you have any insight on public forums you wanted to that you've learned along the way here?
No, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head. The virtual meetings on hearings are much more difficult, and to comply even with the emergency legislation is more cumbersome because the public has to be able to participate. And I know there are certain constraints that you have on the IT side, particular to Hanson. But I have seen public hearings go forward where there is the technical capacity to share the screen and show the plans and have the public be able to participate, but it's cumbersome for sure. On the public meetings, we're doing it right now. It's working really well, and I think the public does have some great access to you all and to your thoughts and deliberations. But hopefully this is ratcheting down, and we will be able to have that in person, face-to-face soon.
Okay, and I think, John, my understanding is that our town planner, Deb Petty, I know she spoke with Eric Dresser and had some training on how the planning board, and she might even roll it out to ZBA and some of the other land use boards, might be able to use the same platform that they've been using for the school committee, where it is a little bit more robust, and there is the video component to that. Do you have any updates on that, or do you know if that's something that they're ready to implement? Because I know they've got things starting to queue up for them.
Yeah, I think Deb Petty has been working with Whitman Hanson Cable, and I don't have an update of where they are on it, but I know that she is figuring how to work that technology. So that's somewhere where I think that is going to be happening, very soon, especially now that we've moved things back. But I'm thinking on this particular agenda item, it may have been more of, and maybe this might be for Kate. Can we have a public meeting if less than 10 people show up? If let's say that it moves to 25 people, what happens when there's a public meeting, and if you have a public meeting and 24 people are there and then 2 people show? I mean, I think that was more of the question of some boards thought that they could meet and nobody ever shows up anyway, unfortunately. So there may be actually 10 people or less in a room that could socially distance. Would that be permitted?
Yeah, so taking a step back, I wasn't going to say anything on this, but the public meetings and hearings that take place at town halls can be deemed essential services. So that 10-person limitation technically may not apply, even though it probably should, for public health reasons, apply. And the Board of Health could intervene if there were large meetings and they felt like it was a public hazard. So there's a risk associated with the repercussions for having a meeting. But you're right. The reality is many times people don't show. But if you're sticking to that 10-person limitation and adhering to that rule because of the importance of maintaining people's health and protecting their health, I think where you may run afoul is if people do show up in droves for some strange reason, you may run afoul of even the emergency legislation if you provided different access to different people. So it's one thing if a person, you know, there's the most common argument that people say, well, they may not have computer access. Well, typically there's a call-in number and a computer number, so the availability is there. But maybe they are just unfamiliar with the technology and feel uncomfortable using it. But it's the same kind of limitation as if a person doesn't drive, and normally they would have to drive to town hall. So that's sort of a, I don't want to say self-created, but an individual's limitations based on their own decisions. But where you've opened it up to the public to attend a meeting at town hall, and then you get to that 10-person limit that you feel is appropriate to enforce, and you start turning people away, that could run afoul of the open meeting law. I'm not sure if is that clear?
It's clear to me, John, that we probably need to stay the course, and until we're able to fully open up, then we need to probably continue to do virtual.
Understood. I wanted to get the clarification because several people have said we have meetings and nobody ever shows. And it would, in a normal situation when no one shows, there are less than 10 people in the room, and they could socially distance in a large room. Why can't we meet? So it's great that Kate gave that that explanation. That, you know, even though that may be technically possible, it's not something we should be doing.
And the reality is, what you have to think about is your employees, right? So the public can decide for themselves whether or not they want to come. And again, I'm not your labor and employment lawyer, but you know, here you're exposing your employees to a known risk by allowing the public to come in, where we're trying to really limit that, and you don't have those same protections that you have when they say come to, I don't know, the treasurer's office, where there's a shield, you know, protecting the employee from the public. So those same protections don't exist in the room upstairs on the 3rd floor or in the selectmen's meeting room. So for those reasons, you know, it would be a hard thing to force the employees to deal with, frankly.
Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to the end of FY21 transfers and possible town administrator authorization to approve. And Kate, feel free to stay on, but we've picked your brain quite a bit this evening and really appreciate all of your advice as usual and all of the support that you give us. But so if you want to hop off, feel free.
Thank you so much, guys, and I appreciate your time. And I hope to see you in person soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, John, did you want to lay this up? End of FY21 transfers and possible town administrator authorization to approve?
Yes, thank you. So Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 33B, allow transfers from appropriations in the last 2 months of a fiscal year from one if the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen approve those transfers. And in the past, I guess here the Board of Selectmen have given the town administrator the power to okay on behalf of them any transfers that need to be done with the concurrence of the Finance Committee as well. The Finance Committee has to sign these as well. So these are the end of the year ones where I'm going to make it up. It goes from one appropriation in the general fund to another appropriation in the general fund. Again, from treasurer collector expenses to I don't know, police salaries. These are amounts that you can transfer at the end of the year, the last 2 months. So in the past, you've voted to allow me to do that on behalf of the board. And when the finance committee also agrees on them, then those transfers are made.
Okay, so what should this motion look like?
Something like to move to allow the town administrator to approve transfers on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, to approve Chapter 44, Section 33B related transfers on behalf of the Board of Selectmen.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
So moved by Matt.
Second by Kenny.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss.
Can I just ask, why is this
Oh, yeah.
fiscal year 21? I'm just confused on that.
That's a typo. That should be fiscal year 20. Sorry about that.
All right, aye.
And Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, extension or expiration of town administrator's authorization to sign warrants. So as you know, because of this whole situation, we haven't been able to get into the office and sign warrants. John, what date were you suggesting that we extend this to?
Whenever, if phase 2 comes into play, I would think, at least I would think until June 2nd. I'm looking at Greer.
Whenever phase 2.
Yeah, at least June 2nd, I would say. I didn't have a date in mind. I just wanted to see if you wanted to continue doing it or not.
Well, why don't we, June 2nd seems like practically around the corner. I mean, can't we just make a motion to do it until the end of June? And then if things resolve quicker than that and we are coming in and doing it, if we can just make a mental note to revisit that and revote it.
Yeah,
Laura?
West moves for June 30th.
Second by Matt.
Okay, great. Roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. And we've got next, nominate Elder Affairs Director Mary Collins to Old Elder Services Board. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved by Matt.
Second by Kenny.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
Ms. Kemet, aye. Great. And old business, revisit right of first refusal on 902 Main Street, Unit 39. Mr. Stanbrook.
Yes, thank you. So you had already voted back in February that you have to give up the right of first refusal on 902 Main Street, Unit 39. Because of what's been going on with the coronavirus, the housing authorities had to do some recalculations, and I guess that approval or that permission has timed out. So if you need to vote it again to allow that, to waive the right of first refusal on that particular property.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion, and does that just need to say that we are, what does that motion need to look like?
Go ahead.
That you reaffirm your vote to waive the town's right of first refusal on 902 Main Street, Unit 39.
Perfect. I will entertain a
So moved by
motion.
Matt.
Second by Kenny.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. Okay, fabulous. That brings us to Whitman Hanson Regional School District budget update. I This has been quite a meeting. We've gone over quite a bit of material, and we did already speak about the basics of this. And I know, John, I believe in your town administrator's report, you were planning on giving us a thumbnail sketch of where we were. Is there any need for us to take a vote on anything tonight?
No, not tonight.
Okay. Then I think we will put that on the agenda for next week. And I think everybody knows, what the offer is, if you will, on the table. With that, we'll move to unless somebody wants to discuss it. I don't, Kenny, Matt, Jim, Wes, any desire to get into that any more than what we already have and what Mr. Stanbrook's going to talk about? Okay, I will take that as a resounding no. We will then move to the town administrator's report. Mr. Stanbrook.
Thank you. So we were just talking about how I've been signing warrants on behalf of the Board of Selectmen for since this COVID thing started. I have signed a total of 6 warrants. One dated 5/7/2020, warrant 45 for $88,614.99. It was a vendor warrant. A warrant dated 5/7/20, a warrant 45 PR for $137,307.53, and that was a payroll warrant. Another warrant dated 5/7/20 for warrant 45 WH for $26,105.76, and that was a payroll withholding warrant. A warrant dated May 14th, 2020, warrant 46 for $37,329.30. That was a vendor warrant. Another warrant dated May 14th, 2020, warrant 46 PR for $355.42, and that's a payroll warrant. And then the last warrant that I've signed is May 14th, 2020, warrant 46 WH, and that's $27,428.05, and that's a payroll withholding warrant. So under new business, several things have happened, and just kind of run down with them real quickly, and we can talk about maybe at another meeting of what to do on some of these things anyway. But first of all, I received an email from Mr. Ralph Greenberg from Impressed LLC. They are interested in coming before the board to discuss, in addition to their current cultivation license for cannabis, to include manufacture of cannabis-based products. So the new license that they would be seeking would be cultivation and manufacture of cannabis or cannabis-based products at their location at 15 Commercial Way. And he's interested to come in to discuss I guess can't come in anymore. I guess it would be virtually to discuss a new host agreement relating to that manufacturing. He contacted me, probably I think it was late March or so, and with everything that's been going on, it's been unfortunately pushed to the back burner. But I did want to bring that up, and I, maybe we could talk about where we can. This can be put off until we can meet again in person, or because it's obviously it's going to be controversial, and it's difficult to do this type of controversial thing over the phone or in a video type Zoom type format.
I feel very strongly, John, that this does need to be put off because I think it's critical that we get public input. It's required, but it's also critical. And I just don't see, given our constraints virtually, that we're going to have that kind of dialogue and open conversation that we've been able to have when people are in person. So unless there's some type of a regulatory timeline that we're under that requires us to do this in the middle of while we're grappling with this technological stuff, I would just assume that we postpone that conversation, because if they're proposing a change, what they originally applied for was cultivation. And so all of the conversations that we've had with them have been around cultivation, and they satisfied most of our concerns, and we sort of like, that was the last we heard from them. But now they're talking about manufacturing. Well, that's a whole different process. So we might have different questions, and the public would too. But that's just my thoughts. I'll quickly go around and see what other people think. Mr. Dyer.
I agree that, something like this should be done in person. But John, if you could reach back out to them and just see what their timeline is. If we could reach back out to Kate and see what would the process be like? Do they have to start from go again, or can they build off what they have? And kind of see what that process would look like moving forward. And I think those would be my only questions right at the time.
Okay, Mr. Mitchell.
I agree with Matt 100%. We should definitely wait until we're in public, but let's find out exactly what their timelines are so we can make sure that, we're being compliant to them as well, especially where they submitted something back in March. So, yeah, I would check that out with Kate, please, John.
Okay, great. Mr. Hickey?
John, my question, obviously Matt and Kenny and Laura have already talked about, meeting in person and stuff. How much income would this be for the town of Hanson with them manufacturing?
We had an initial discussion when we could still meet in public with Mr. Greenberg, and Kate was present. There were other representatives of his firm. Again, I'm not sure whether what he was saying to us it was public information or not, but it's a substantial increase over what was projected under cultivation alone. It was at least 2 or 3 times what he thought he could do with cultivation. Again, I'm not sure if the numbers were public or were just it was a kind of a meet and greet meeting, and I'm not sure whether that should be broadcast, but it was a large amount over what cultivation alone would be.
Okay, so you don't want to ask me, since it's public record, what cultivation was, because I could do the math and figure that out. No, I'm good.
Okay, Mr. Bloss?
No, I'm good too.
Okay. And I think the thing to keep in mind is, even if we were willing to have this conversation, even if we could figure out a way to do it, there's quite a bit of lead time before they would ever get approval to be doing this. And my understanding is that the Cannabis Control Commission is also on shutdown and not necessarily approving things at a breakneck speed. So, if you can just circle back and ask those questions to Kate that came up tonight, John, that would be awesome.
Yes, I absolutely will.
Okay, great.
Okay, so I'll move on my report. So the monthly financial report, the special act that authorizes a Hanson Town Administrator requires me to give the board a monthly financial report, and Town Accountant Todd Hassett has been providing me those reports monthly, and I have passed them along to you, and I'll continue to do so each month. If you have any questions on those reports, you can ask me offline, and I can forward them to Todd. He's the best, and he can answer any question that you might have. On Whitman Hanson, there was a request that came to me that I passed on to the Board of Health, and I believe it's been through the police chief. I'm not sure it's been through the fire chief yet. It was a senior class parade and graduation request for May 29th, and it was, again, I'll go over it very quickly, but it was the normal senior class graduating ceremonies obviously can't be held. So what they were asking to do was at the high school was at 1:30, seniors would begin a parade of cars through the driveways on the campus. No one would be exiting their vehicles. They would be led by police cars through a gauntlet of staff members wearing masks from every building. They'll be standing approximately 6 feet apart, and there'll be cheers, signs, sirens, pictures, and people are going to be driving by. There isn't going to be any physical interaction between people. So that was this there. And again, there's another request for graduation on July 31st. but the pressing one was for May 29th, the senior class parade. I did put out to the Board of Health and the chief, police chief mix, and they did not have any problems with what they were doing, as long as the appropriate measures are taken to, to make sure that we're all socially distancing. So I'm not sure how, whether.
Are you looking for a vote, John?
Yeah, I'm not, it came to me, and again, because I'm new, I don't know if I have the power to grant something like that. That's why I asked the Board of Health. It sounds like a Board of Health thing. They didn't have a problem with it. If it's up to me, it looks like it might be, then I wanted at least the board to know about it, and if they had any objections to it, I'd like to know.
Okay. Mr. Dyer, thoughts?
Nope, it sounds great, as long as all the safety precautions are recognized and followed.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Nope, I'm totally fine with it.
Okay. Mr. Hickey?
I'm good.
And Mr. Bloss?
I'm good too, thank you.
Okay, great. So, John, I don't think we need a vote. I mean, we did technically vote to close down, the town fields and everything, but this isn't really the field. It's at the school, but it's on Hanson town property. So I think you're good to go. I don't think we need to take a vote on it.
Okay, thank you, but I just wanted to bring it up. That's fine. So what else happened last week was that the Plymouth County came out with some guidance on what money they've received under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or CARES. So the CARES Act that everyone's heard about. The Plymouth County, there was a large, and it's in your packet, a large PowerPoint presentation, but I'll try to distill it down quickly. The Plymouth County applied for money from the feds for the CARES Act, and they received approximately $90.99 million. Let me say that again, $90.9 million to the county. Most other counties that applied that were eligible in the Commonwealth turned their money over to the state. I think there were only two entities. Was Plymouth County kept the money, and Boston, which obviously isn't a county, but Boston kept the money for themselves. So this money from the feds is for only expenses incurred. It's not for revenue replacement. So if you think about, it has to be something like, for example, the plexiglass that we're putting up around Town Hall in order to allow the public to come in and again, eventually when we get there, those costs would be expenses incurred, and those would be reimbursable under the act, under the money that the county got. Things like, again, we were talking earlier about recreation and how, let's say 4 weddings have been canceled because they, I'm going to make the numbers up, $500 each. And I know that's very low for a wedding, but so you can't use $2,000 worth of revenue loss as a reimbursement. It has to be actually expenses that have gone out the door. Those are the only ones that this money will reimburse the town for. These are costs that have been incurred by the town from March 1st this year to December 31st. So it doesn't stop on June 30th. It goes all the way to December, the end of the year, the end of the calendar year. The county has decided to put 25% of the $90.9 million that it received in a phase 1 approach of trying to get that money out to get expenses paid as quickly as possible. Hanson's cut of that, I guess, Hanson's amount of them is a potential reimbursement is $476,598.53. And just some questions have come up about whether or not costs related to the regional school district and what they've had to do in order to, get ready for COVID-19 and do the things that they've had to do. Those can be included in the cost or reimbursement requests. The web portals will be set up by early next week to submit reimbursement claims. So again, people have asked me, well, what are they requesting? What do they want? What do we do? The answer is I don't know, because they haven't created it yet. As soon as they allow me to take a look at it, I'll see what it is, and then I'll have more information of what they're looking for as far as documentation for the costs. But that's only the first phase of that $476,000. That's the first phase of money going out by town. And then phase 2 and phase 3 will come along later, and I think they're going to target areas where that were disproportionately hit, and I'm not sure whether or not that will be broken out by population like this first phase is. So that's what's going on with that. And again, any questions, we could talk about that later. Memorial Day plans, I'm just moving on to that. Again, the traditional parade has been canceled, but there is going to be a small ceremony, but because of the, we don't want to violate any of the group. Earlier I called it the crowd limits. I couldn't think of another phrase to come up with, but the groups of people can't be more than what we're saying. I believe that the Veterans Agent is going to be coming up with a press release on what's going on, but there's going to be a small Memorial Day observance, but those that would like to participate could also, it'll be broadcast throughout the day on cable and other areas. So the parade obviously has been canceled, and I think pretty much everyone knew that. And then again, finally on the budget documents, just last night, the Regional School District School Committee voted a budget of $55,320,238 as a total amount. That does include the 4 new teachers. So if, I don't know if it's been a while since we've talked about it, but it went back and forth about whether or not to add 4 new teachers in hard-hit areas. And that amount does include those 4 new teachers. Hanson's fiscal year 21 assessment for operating will be $11,214,177, and that's a reduction of $699,045 from the amount that we've been working with, which was $11,900 or so. They used $350,000 in excess and deficiency funds. That's the regional schools equivalent of free cash. And they also used $250,000 in circuit breaker funds for special education. The state reimburses at a particular rate for special education funds that the school incurs, and under a complicated formula. So they use those amounts in order to reduce the assessment. So again, we talked about it earlier. Right now, the general fund budget deficit for Hanson for fiscal year 21 is, the initial number was 1.5 million. Again, I'm rounding the numbers off. We had a reduction last night of 699,000 so the total that Mr. Sullivan was talking about earlier of $865,010. Again, and that was tied to amending the regional agreement before town meeting. As soon as I get the regional agreement and the formal vote, I'll send that along. I may have actually got it while we're meeting here. I'm not sure.
You did. Yeah.
So, okay, great.
John, one thing on this, and we'll have to, I think, talk about it next week, but when you just wrote that last line tied to amending the regional agreement before town meeting, it got me thinking, well, we won't be. We've got the override on the town the ballot, but we won't have already approved the town amendment, and I'm not sure that those two things can happen in that order.
I think given what happened tonight, I think you're right. I should have struck that letter. I wrote this obviously before the meeting, so I think the regional agreement could not be. We'll have to take that up again, I guess.
Yeah, well, so I think we're going to have to circle back with Kate and talk about the order of things and what that means, because we'd be passing an override at town meeting at the ballot without having had town meeting, which would have been passing the amendment to the regional agreement. And I just don't know if, I'm probably not even articulating this because I'm tired and everybody else is, and it's been a long meeting, but not sure that that order works. I think that there's something might have jumped the track. So if we can circle back with Kate on that, that would be good.
I absolutely will. And just, again, I'm not saying that this is going to be the budget deficit amount, but let's say in a hypothetical situation that $865,010 was an override amount. Again, I'm not saying it is, but if it were to be that, and we used fiscal year 20's values for the town because we don't have fiscal year 21's yet. So that would be a 61-cent increase on the tax rate on the average house, which last year was $354,368. That's the average residential home in Hanson. So that amount, that hypothetical amount, would be an increase of $216.16. So again, that's not set in stone. That's not the override amount. But in a hypothetical situation, if that were the case, that would be the increase on the houses, the average house in town. And finally, I just want to say again, thank you to everybody else. I've been saying it at every meeting, but you know, everyone here at the town hall and throughout the town is really working very hard. And they've done a fantastic job during this pandemic, and I just want to say thank you to all of them. And that's it. Thank you.
Well, and thank you and Greer for you know, being at the helm and seeing us through these bizarre, uncharted times. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Matt.
Second by Kenny.
Roll call, Mr. Dyer,
Aye.
Mr. Mitchell,
Aye.
Mr. Hickey,
Aye.
Mr. Bloss,
Aye.
and Ms. Kemet, aye. And thank you, and everybody stay safe.